You ever get the feeling that putting up a sign on your own land shouldn't feel like poking a hornet's nest with a cattle prod? Well, I found out the hard way that in Glenwood Estates, 3 simple wooden signs might as well be Molotov cocktails. The day I planted them, nothing fancy, just private property, Grant Ranch, and keep out unless invited. You'd think I spray-painted obscenities on the HOA president's front door. Less than 24 hours later, I had sirens screaming down my private road, 2 cruisers pulling up like I'd been cooking meth, and out pops Beverly Hartwell in her signature coral blazer, looking like an angry flamingo on a mission from the Almighty. She was pointing at my signs like I'd declared war on the community. "Officers, this man is destroying the harmony of Glenwood Estates," she wailed, hitting vocal frequencies that rattled my truck windows. Meanwhile, I stood there holding my coffee, wearing slippers and confusion, wondering what kind of HOA thinks property lines are public domain. Leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If you love wild, true-feeling stories packed with twists, justice, and just the right amount of HOA chaos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story is even more jaw-dropping, and trust me, the surprises coming next, you won't want to miss them. Now, I'm not new to land. I'd spent 15 years in development before settling into a quiet life and inheriting my grandfather's old ranch. The road leading to it? Privately owned and maintained by our family since the Kennedy administration. My grandfather, Henry Grant, was a lot of things. Stubborn, sharp, and about 3 chess moves ahead of any fool who tried him. He kept that road off the HOA map deliberately, and he put it in writing. So when Officer Monroe asked for my deed, I handed it over like a Sunday bulletin. Beverly's face dropped faster than a politician caught on camera. But this affects all of us," she sputtered, suddenly less righteous, more rabid chihuahua. Monroe shrugged, clearly trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, he's within his rights. It's his land. If looks could kill, I'd be fertilizer." Beverly hissed something about, "This ain't over, Mr. Grant," and marched off like she was headed to call the National Guard. That afternoon, my buddy Reggie rolled in with a 6-pack and the best kind of smirk. The kind that says, "You've kicked the hornet nest, and now it's popcorn time." Reggie's a welder by trade and HOA's worst nightmare by nature. "Man, you should see the neighborhood group chat. Beverly's foaming at the mouth." We laughed about it, right up until my phone buzzed with an email from Beverly herself. Subject line, "Cease and desist. Immediate action required." She threatened to sue me, ruin my reputation, and take appropriate measures if the signs weren't down by the next day. That's when my amusement stopped cold. This wasn't HOA fluff anymore. I had my daughter May to think about, and I wasn't about to let some clipboard queen steamroll us for kicks. I muttered under my breath, "This ain't your turf, Beverly," as I stared at her email like it was a rattlesnake in a necktie. Next day, I was sipping coffee again, because stress tastes better with caffeine, when I spotted a crowd gathering at the edge of my land. 15 of them. HOA board members standing just short of my signs like they were approaching an electric fence. Beverly, of course, was in front, waving her arms like she was conducting some deranged orchestra. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or install a moat. That evening, Reggie called me, breathless. "Wes, you ain't gonna believe this. Some punk in a hoodie just tagged one of your signs with red spray paint. Wrote 'Go away.'" That's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was personal. Beverly had declared war, and she was sending foot soldiers. Inside, May was at the kitchen table, coloring in a princess book like the world wasn't trying to shove us off the map. I stood there, watching her, feeling something heavy start to settle in my chest. Rage? Maybe. Or maybe it was resolve finally dragging its boots out of the closet. That night, I went digging through my grandfather's old papers, the kind of brittle yellow documents that smell like tobacco and wisdom. I found tax records, land grants, and a letter I'd never seen before. It was addressed to my grandson, if you're reading this. That alone chilled me. It said something about a deal from the 60s, one tied to our private road, worth millions, and more importantly, don't let them take what's yours. I looked up, heart thudding. That's when I realized this fight wasn't just about signs. It was about history, legacy, and leverage. The kind of leverage that turns HOA board members into scheming politicians. I stared out at those signs, standing proud like stubborn soldiers in the dusk, and I swore right then. Beverly might have started this fight, but I was sure as hell going to finish it. I was brushing my teeth when Reggie called. "Hey, your sign just got tagged," he said, like it was casual weather news. I spit out toothpaste and asked him to repeat that slower. "Red spray paint. Said, go away. Some punk in a hoodie took off running." I tried to chase him, but my knee cracked like bubble wrap. I didn't even flinch. See, when someone's resorting to middle school graffiti, they're out of ammo. But this wasn't just neighborhood kids with nothing better to do. This had Shirley's handwriting all over it, except she used other people's hands. I stepped outside to look at the sign. The paint was sloppy, rushed, like whoever did it wanted to make a mess and vanish, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome. On my own land. I stood there in my boots, thinking about my daughter May inside, eating cereal and humming like nothing had happened. That sign was never just a sign, it was a dare. And Beverly Hartwell? She'd accepted it like she was gunning for it, but I wasn't about to take a hammer to my own fence to please a woman who thought she was queen of cul-de-sacs. Later that day, Evelyn stopped by again. She looked nervous, like a woman carrying bad news and hoping it would spoil fast. "Wesley," she said, "I need you to know something." Her voice dropped. "This isn't Beverly's first time pulling this mess. 5 years ago it was the Hendersons. She made up a violation, threatened to report them for zoning, and suddenly their place went on the market." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess," I said. "It got scooped up by someone she knew?" Evelyn nodded. "Her cousin bought it for 70 cents on the dollar, then flipped it to a developer." I let out a slow breath. "This ain't just about paint or signs, is it?" Evelyn leaned in. "No, Wesley. It's about your road." That night, Reggie and I were digging through my grandfather's old metal filing cabinet in the garage. He cracked open a folder, held up a faded document, and whistled. "Land grant," he said. "From the 60s. Your grandfather had some kind of arrangement tied to a proposed development." I scanned it. Sure enough, it referenced a proposed easement route connected to what is now the edge of Glenwood Estate. It also mentioned value projections. If the state ever approved highway expansion, this road would be key. "So basically," Reggie said, "if someone owns this road and that expansion happens, they own the gate to millions." I leaned back, heart pounding a little harder. "And Beverly knows it," I said. "She's not afraid of my sign. She's afraid of what's under it." The next morning, I saw Brad Hartwell at the hardware store. Looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "You got a minute?" he asked. We stepped outside. "I know my mom's intense," he started, "but she wasn't always like this. After my dad died, something changed. She started locking herself in his old study. Wouldn't let anyone in. She talked to his picture, Wesley, like full conversations." I said nothing. He kept going. "She has maps, papers, property lines. She gets like this when she thinks someone's messing with what's hers." I studied his face. He wasn't making excuses. He was trying to breathe around the weight of his own mother. "She thinks you're trying to steal something that was never hers to begin with," he finished. I drove home, slow, trying to connect it all. Beverly's obsession with signs, her HOA minions lining up like synchronized lawn ornaments, the vandalism, the fake fines. It was never about community standards. It was leverage, and leverage means land. If you control access, you control price, and if you do it quietly, behind rules and bylaws, people don't see theft. They see order, unless someone fights back, and suddenly you're a threat, not a neighbor. So I did what any modern landowner would do. I posted a meme. A photo of a queen chess piece tipped over with the caption, "When you forget whose land you're on." Reggie loved it. "She's going to throw a gasket," he texted. "Hope she's got HOA insurance for emotional damage." The comments came fast, laughing emojis, popcorn gifs. One guy posted a photo of his own HOA violation for a non-numeral mailbox color. But the real message came later. A printed letter hand-delivered by some kid who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. It wasn't even signed, just said, "Due to repeated violations of Glenwood Estates guidelines, emergency action will be considered to ensure community protection." I read it twice. No vote, no hearing, no transparency, just action. That's not governance. That's a power grab in khakis. And suddenly, it was clear Beverly wasn't waiting anymore. She was moving, fast. And from the looks of it, she wasn't stopping at paint and paperwork. This wasn't just going to be messy. It was going to be dangerous. That night, I walked the road with a flashlight, stopping at each sign, just staring at them like they were sentries on duty. My grandfather had known something. That letter I found, the one warning me not to let them take the road, wasn't paranoia. It was prophecy. And I wasn't about to let it come true on my watch. If this story hit a little too close to home, or you know someone dealing with a power-tripping HOA like Beverly, go ahead and share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. Sometimes the first step to standing your ground is hearing someone else do it first. And if you found this lesson helpful, send it to a friend who might be facing the same mess. Leave a comment and let me know what you think of this story. I read every one. You ever get invited to a meeting where you're the main event and nobody tells you? That's what it felt like walking into the Glenwood Estates Community Center. Folding chairs lined up like they were waiting for a sacrificial goat, and I'm thinking, well, lucky me. Beverly Hartwell stood at the front, smug as ever, clicking her mouse like she was launching a rocket. "Let's begin," she said, dressed like a corporate CEO doing cosplay. Her laptop screen lit up with a title slide. Community Standards Violations, Exhibit A, Mr. Wesley Grant. Subtle, right? Next slide. A photo of my wooden sign. Big, bright, and so zoomed in you could count the knots in the wood. Then came 10 more angles. Daylight, dusk, close-up, wide shot. One even looked like it was taken from inside a bush. "These signs," Beverly declared, "are aggressive, non-compliant, and deeply damaging to our neighborhood's harmony." You'd think I installed a billboard for a casino. I stood there, arms crossed, resisting the urge to ask if she'd booked Spielberg to direct the next HOA presentation. The crowd was split, some nodding, others clearly wondering what exactly we were doing here. I stayed quiet. No need to feed the fire. It was already roaring. But Beverly wasn't done. "Furthermore," she said, tapping her tablet like it owed her money, "HOI records indicate Mr. Grant's access road is, in fact, shared community property. As such, he owes 15 years of back maintenance dues." That one landed hard. A few gasps, some whispered confusion. I pulled out my deed and said calmly, "Here's the original purchase from 1962. The road is entirely private, maintained solely by my grandfather and our family." I offered copies to the board. Beverly cut in fast. "We don't verify personal documents in this forum," she said, like she was running a courtroom instead of a glorified PTA. "Our records are sufficient." That's when a voice from the back spoke up. "I remember when Henry Grant built that road. It's his." Everyone turned to see Mrs. Keller, 83 years old and sharper than half the board. "They tried to claim it in 87, too. Lost then, just like they'll lose now." You'd think that would shut it down, but Beverly, sensing her narrative slipping, moved fast. Given the division of opinion, she said, "I motion we fine Mr. Grant $5,000 for violating community visual standards." Someone seconded it. Then hands shot up, some hesitant, others robotic. I saw one board member shrug before raising his hand like he was ordering lunch. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Just like that? $5,000? Because my signs didn't match Beverly's personal brand of suburbia. I walked out without saying a word. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was cataloging. People forget. When you work in land deals, you learn how to sit through noise and wait for the fault line. 2 days later, I was at the grocery store, walking past the produce when Beverly popped up like a bad commercial. "Lovely little girl you have," she said, referring to May, who was in the cart, coloring on a receipt. It would be such a shame if people judged her unfairly because of her father's resistance to cooperation. She said it with a smile, but the meaning was colder than the frozen food aisle. I looked at her, deadpan. That sounds like a threat. She laughed, too hard, too fast. Oh no, Wesley, I'm just saying people talk. And then she walked away like she hadn't just threatened a child's social life in aisle 6. That's when I knew I wasn't just dealing with a control freak. I was dealing with someone whose fuse had been lit years ago and was now burning toward the dynamite. That night, Evelyn called again. Her voice was low, cautious. Wesley, I've been watching her, she said. I think there's something wrong. She talks to her husband's photo. At night, like full conversations. She asks if she's doing the right thing. If he's proud of her, then argues with it. Says she's protecting what he built. I didn't say a word. She continued, Bragg told me it's been going on for years. He tried to talk to her once about getting help. She threw a plate at the wall and locked herself in his old office for 3 days. Told him she couldn't lose everything he worked for. Evelyn took a breath. Wesley, this isn't about you. It's about her not letting go. And just like that, it all clicked. The sign rage, the legal fiction, the fines, it was all tethered to some vision she had of legacy, hers, his, theirs. My road wasn't just in her way. It was threatening her narrative. The worst part? People like Beverly don't break when you confront them. They just escalate. They go underground. They start rewriting the rules. And based on how fast that vote happened, I had a feeling she wasn't done writing chapters. I thought I'd seen HOA drama at its peak. I was wrong. Beverly decided to throw what she called a community standards review session, which sounded like a book club until you realized I was the book and every page was on trial. She packed the rec center with more folding chairs than a wedding hall, brought in snacks like it was a fundraiser, and sat at the front table like she was preparing for cross-examination. And just when I thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, she introduced her guest of honor, Roger Blaine, HOA's newly hired legal counsel. The man walked in wearing a pinstripe suit and more grease than a used axle, smiled like he charged by the smirk, and said, "Let's keep this civil, folks." Spoiler, he didn't mean it. Beverly kicked off her slideshow like it was her opening statement in a high-profile lawsuit. Wesley Grant, she began, has exhibited a pattern of non-compliance, aggression, and community disruption. Click, photo of my sign. Click, zoomed-in map with questionable red lines. Click, scanned records that looked like they were printed that morning. Here we see Mr. Grant's road intersecting shared green space, thus qualifying it for HOA maintenance assessment. I raised my hand to object, but Roger chimed in. "Let's allow Beverly to finish, Mr. Grant. You'll have your turn." It felt less like a meeting and more like a puppet show where every string led back to the same sweaty lawyer. I glanced at the board. Half looked confused, the other half looked like they'd rather be home watching reruns. Then Beverly dropped her bomb. "In addition to these violations," she said, voice shifting into theatrical overdrive, "we have visual evidence of Mr. Grant's hostility." The lights dimmed. A video played on screen, shaky footage of me putting up my sign, but this version had ominous music, slow zooms, and my voice distorted to sound angry. Someone had edited a voiceover. "They won't stop me. They'll regret it." I almost laughed, except I saw my daughter's face flash across my mind. Beverly looked pleased with herself, like she'd produced a crime documentary. "This man," she said, "poses a threat to Glenwood Estates." Someone near the back whispered, "Is that even real?" But the seed was planted. Beverly wasn't trying to win legally, she was trying to win emotionally. The next week was hell. My business, my actual repair shop downtown, took a hit. Customers canceled. One guy said, "I saw the HOA video and, better safe than sorry." Better safe than sorry? I'd never even gotten a parking ticket. But smear campaigns aren't about facts. They're about fear. At May's school, one of her classmates told her, My mom says your dad is bad and might go to jail. May came home quiet, clutching her backpack like a life vest. Dad, she asked, am I still allowed to play at our house? That right there? That broke something in me. Beverly wasn't just targeting land anymore, she was targeting legacy. I dug into my grandfather's files again. Every scrap of paper, every survey, every dusty envelope. That's when I found it. An independent land survey from 1998, signed by none other than Beverly Hartwell. It confirmed that the road was privately owned and excluded from HOA jurisdiction. Her own name, her own signature. I laughed out loud. Not a happy laugh, a this is how you bury yourself laugh. And while I was riding that high, Evelyn called. Wesley, she said, you need to see what I found. She showed up at my porch with a manila folder and her usual whisper. Inside was a document labeled Grant Displacement Plan Revised 2021. It was typed, organized, and horrifying. Steps to isolate me, discredit my ownership, file liens, pressure surrounding owners. Step 5, install temporary security gate to restrict access. I stared at the date. She'd drafted this plan 2 years before I even inherited the property. That's when it became clear. Beverly had been playing a long game. This wasn't a feud, it was a blueprint. A slow-movement heist disguised as neighborly concern. The fake records, the fines, the video. It wasn't just HOA nonsense, it was a campaign. And when people go to these lengths for a piece of land, you start to wonder what's underneath it. Because land doesn't just mean property, it means power, and some people would rather burn their lives down than give that up. But what Beverly didn't know was that her plan had a leak. And the truth? It was dripping into every corner of this neighborhood. If you had told me a few months ago that I'd be falsely accused of murder at a community HOA meeting, I'd have laughed and said only if the landscaping committee turns into CSI. But sure enough, Beverly Hartwell officially lost whatever was left of her grip. It happened on a foggy Tuesday morning. I was getting May ready for school when there was a knock at the door. 2 officers stood there, looking awkward. Mr. Grant, one said, we need to ask you some questions regarding the death of Harold Hartwell. I blinked. You mean her husband who died 15 years ago of a heart attack? The younger officer shifted. Yes, sir. She's alleging that you were involved. I looked at them, then down at my coffee, wondering which reality we were operating in. I handed them a box of documents showing I lived 2 states away in 2008. They took a polite look and left. But by then the damage was done. Accusation travels like wildfire, and fact walks behind it, limping in flip-flops. And that's when Beverly's unraveling went public. The hearing for my restraining order against her turned into a full-blown meltdown. She walked in talking to a framed photo of Harold, clutching it like it was a legal document. She sat at the table, whispering to it, then stood up mid-proceeding and shouted, "He stole everything from us, Harold, everything!" The judge asked her to sit. She refused. "Don't you see? He's trying to erase you, just like Henry did." She waved her arms at me like I was the ghost of property lines past. "The judge ordered a psych evaluation on the spot." Beverly looked at Brad, who was in the gallery, and screamed, "Don't just sit there, tell them about the land." Brad put his head in his hands, and that was the moment, the exact moment. Everyone saw the truth. This wasn't leadership. This wasn't protection. This was delusion in a pantsuit. A week later, I presented the reverter clause, quietly, professionally, in front of the HOA board, with copies for each member and a summary of how it worked. My grandfather had included language in the original land sale. If the HOA ever attempted to claim or restrict the use of our private access road, the shared community areas would revert to the Grant estate. Which means, I said, since Ms. Hartwell ordered barriers, imposed fines, and launched enforcement actions, you've triggered the clause. The room was dead quiet. A few people looked like they wanted to slide under their chairs. "You're bluffing," one muttered. I handed over notarized paperwork. "It's filed and enforceable, checked with the county clerk myself." Roger, Beverly's lawyer, wasn't there. He'd ghosted after the video scandal. Probably didn't want to be caught in the crater when the bomb went off. Then Evelyn brought the match. She'd been digging into the HOA's financials for months and came back with receipts, literal ones. "This landscaping retreat," she said, holding up an invoice. "It's a Caribbean cruise, 5-star, paid through HOA funds." Another paper, $5,400 0 cents for an Italian handbag labeled Community Outreach Materials. Evelyn had more. "She's been laundering money through fake initiatives for years, and if we cross-check, most purchases align with stores near her favorite spa." She paused, voice shaking. This wasn't about signs. This was about building a little kingdom on HOA dues. I looked around and saw nods. Shocked ones, angry ones. The tide was shifting, not just against Beverly, but toward something that finally smelled like justice. That night, I sat on the porch, May asleep inside, and watched the last of the light hit the new sign we put up. Private property, Grant Ranch, access by invitation only. Funny how 3 pieces of wood could trigger so much chaos. But the truth is, Beverly never hated the signs. She hated what they represented. Boundaries. Control she couldn't exercise. History she couldn't rewrite. And when you build your authority on a pile of dry lies, it only takes one truth with a match to set it all ablaze. The Queen had collapsed, yes, but something told me she wasn't done crawling. And sure enough, the next morning, Evelyn showed up with another bombshell. "Wesley," she said, "you need to sit down. She just filed a new set of documents, trying to reverse your claim using forged records that date back to 1962. My coffee didn't even have time to cool. Here we go again. 3 days after Beverly's meltdown, I walked into the courthouse carrying the one thing that had been sitting in my safe for months, an envelope marked, "Don't open unless they get stupid." Guess what? They got stupid. I found her in the records office, waving around a stack of what she claimed were original deeds from the 1960s. They looked aged, smelled like vinegar, and were probably printed last week on her nephew's inkjet. "These prove my husband was tricked," she shouted to the poor clerk. "The Grants stole our future." I stood behind her, calm as a cat at a dog show. "Actually," I said, "I brought something too." I handed the clerk my documents. The 1893 land grant, the 1958 survey, and the original sales agreement, plus the reverter clause that might as well have been dynamite wrapped in ribbon. The clerk read them once, then again, slower. Her eyes got wider than a dog seeing its reflection. Ma'am," she said to Beverly, This shows your HOA was built on land technically still protected by the Grant estate." Beverly lunged toward the counter, but security moved in quick. She backed away, clutching her forged papers like a stage prop. "This is fraud!" she screamed. "They tricked Harold! They trapped us all!" I stayed silent. That's the thing about legacy. You don't have to yell when the truth is carrying the mic. The courthouse buzzed with whispers, and when Beverly turned and saw me standing there, she didn't rage. She just stared, like maybe for the first time she realized the chessboard was never hers. Outside, Reggie was waiting in his truck. "So?" he asked. "You burn it down?" I nodded. "She planted flags on someone else's hill," I said, "and got buried by the mountain." We both laughed, not out of malice, but relief. That kind of laugh you only get when a war ends and you're still standing. I spent the next week finalizing paperwork. Turns out the HOA had been skating on legal fiction for years. Once the clause triggered, the shared spaces, clubhouse, parks, community pool, all reverted to the Grant estate. But it didn't stop there. See, I'd quietly purchased 3 adjacent lots from fed-up residents. With that, I controlled the road, the perimeter, and about 80% of access to the neighborhood. On paper, I wasn't just a resident anymore. I was the landlord. But here's the twist. I didn't take the throne. I dismantled it. I called a town hall meeting, set up folding chairs, same ones Beverly used for her tribunals, and stood at the front with May by my side. "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said. "I'm here to fix what got broken." I laid out a new plan. No more arbitrary rules, no more aesthetic fines for mailbox colors or garden flags. Reasonable rent to maintain what matters: roads, safety, shared spaces. Every resident gets a vote. I keep ownership to prevent another Beverly, but everything else? Community-driven. The room sat in stunned silence. Then one old man stood and clapped. Then another. Before long, folks were cheering. A teenager whispered, "Did he just say we get pool toys again?" That's when I knew we weren't just healing, we were building something better. Beverly didn't show up again until the agreements went out. She signed hers quietly, rent set at market rate with a clause that if she stirred up another HOA rebellion, it was null and void. Brad was the one who brought it in. "She's calmer," he said. "Therapy, medication. She's not better, but she's trying." I believed him. The last time I saw her, she was walking through the grocery store, pushing a cart with more grace than I'd ever seen. She glanced at me, then May, and mouthed, "Thank you." And for a split second, I didn't see the tyrant. I saw someone who'd been holding grief like a burning coal and finally decided to let it go. A month later, I hung one final sign at the entrance of the neighborhood. Big, bold, and carved in wood like the original 3 that started it all. It read, "Grant Ranch, now leasing to former tyrants, rent due first of the month." Reggie took a selfie next to it and posted it online with the caption, "From HOA victim to neighborhood king." It went viral, but none of that mattered as much as the quiet moment later that night when May tugged my sleeve and said, "Dad, we're safe now, right?" I smiled and pulled her close. "Yeah, baby, we are. And not just safe. We're home. Sometimes, the land you fight for gives back more than you expect. Not just power, but peace. And that's the part my grandfather never wrote into any deed. The truth is, owning land is power, but knowing how to protect it, that's legacy." That evening, after the dust had settled and the neighborhood stopped buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest, I stood at the edge of my property, the same spot where my first private property sign once stood, the one that launched 1,000 emails, threats, and HOA headaches. Only now there was no fear, no noise, no Beverly barreling down the road in her white SUV. Just quiet. May played in the yard, laughing with kids who used to cross the street to avoid us, and for the first time in months, I exhaled without bracing for war. You know, I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I prepared smarter, stood my ground, and refused to let someone with a title intimidate me off the truth. I didn't take revenge. I restructured power. I didn't seek control. I gave it back to the people. And that's the lesson in all this. Sometimes standing up for what's right doesn't look like shouting. It looks like signing a deed, reading the fine print, and hanging a wooden sign that says, "No bullies allowed." Beverly taught me something too. When people lose control, they often grasp at the closest illusion of power they can find. For her, it was rules, meetings, and threats. But it was never about land. It was about pain she never unpacked. And if we don't check that kind of pain, it grows claws and calls itself authority. What she tried to build with fear collapsed the moment one man stood still and said, "Not here, not anymore." So if this story hit something in you, if you've ever been bullied by a board, cornered by people who weaponize paperwork, or made to feel small in a place you own, share this story with a friend who needs it. Let them know they're not crazy. Let them know they're not alone. And if you've learned something about justice, land, or legacy, drop a comment below and let me know what part stuck with you most. Now it's your turn. What kind of story should I cover next? HOA horror, workplace revenge, a quiet hero who flips the script? Comment below and tell me what real-life situations you'd like to see turned into the next jaw-dropping tale. I read every comment, and the best ideas might just become the next episode. Want your story told? Drop the idea. Want your enemy to become a character named Karen? You know what to do. Let's build the next great story together, because the best stories come from you. Comment below, like, subscribe, and don't miss what's coming next.